Chapter 7 The Wog Dog Embarks for the Front. Next day, the big camp was busy packing up for the move. All knew that battle, hardship, sudden death for some, all the terrible chances of war, lay ahead. In many a man's mind was the rumble of guns far away. Having put the final touches to our signal gear, the rebels carefully packed their personal belongings. My gear was divided amongst the rebels, for mine would be the full-time job of carrying Horrie in the kit bag. With a quaint earnestness, he watched our operations. He sensed this was no play, no preparing for any ordinary route march, but that something serious was afoot. Long after lights out that night I lay awake. Horrie crept from the foot of my bunk and rested his little chin on my arm. As I stroked the faithful little head, I wondered and wondered what the future had in store for us. During these long months we had been training steadily while longing to get into action, and now it was coming. That knowledge brings a grimness to every soldier, no matter whether he be a veteran, untried soldier, or carefree scallywag. Between the recurring visions of fire and battle, my thoughts switched again and again to thoughts of the old folk, of friends, of home, and Australia. I just could not sleep those deathly silent hours away. A match flared up to light a cigarette. "What's up, Don?" I murmured. "Can't you sleep either?" "No," he answered quietly. "I was wondering if that last letter I wrote will arrive home safely." "Of course it will," I replied. "It's funny, you know," he murmured, "the little things you try to say in a letter home. You can't. Somehow they seem sort of sissy on paper." "That's so. Reckon she'll be pretty willing in Greece," ventured Don. "I think so too. Wonder how Popa will go. He'll be Jake. You couldn't kill him with an axe." "Sorry the Gog and Big Jim won't be with us at the start. I'm sorry too, but they'll catch up. Nothing could keep those two out of this stunt. What about putting on a brew, you blokes?" came Murchy's voice. "Can't you sleep either?" asked Don. "No, I can't remember which box I put the Bren magazines in, that I loaded with armor-piercing bullets. Still thinking about your old guns." "No, sugar in my tea, thank you," came from the direction of Fitz's bunk. "None for me either," called Gordy. So we got the Primus going, and soon were sitting around it waiting for the billy to boil. As we were pouring out the tea, there came a snorting sniff, and Popa stepped in the tent door. "Thought I smelled it," he grumbled. "Heard voices too." "Not mine," called Feathers from his corner. "I was waiting for them to wake me up and offer a cup of tea." "You lazy lead swinger," said Murchy, "pulling on your mates, as usual." "It's a luxury to get the chance," grinned Feathers. "They're such expert pullers themselves." "Our last night in the land of milk and honey," droned Popa sepulchrally. "Yeah," drawled Fitz, "if you bring your own bees and cows." "Oh, don't take any notice of Popa," said Murchy witheringly. "The only milk he knows is in a beer jug. I wasn't dragged up anyway, said Popa as he squatted down and reached out a horny paw. "Ah, this tea will go down good." The great day dawned, a quick, more serious breakfast than usual, and the troops stood to their kits in suppressed excitement. Horrie's great moment had also arrived. He was so excited he could not keep still, hurrying from rebel to rebel to gaze outside the tent at 1,000 men fitting on their packs, handling machine guns and rifles in queerly realistic fashion. Line after line of loaded trucks rumbled away across the desert to sharp words of command. Troops were now forming up. Horrie waited with eager eyes, alert little body on quaint, stubby legs, trying hard to stand with martial bearing, proudly dressed up in a new collar flaunting the battalion color patch. We kept a sharp eye on him, otherwise he would have dashed out the tent and lined up at the head of the battalion. "Fall in," came a shouted order, and the rebels hurriedly grabbed the last of their gear. "In you go, Horrie," I ordered, and the dumb look of misery on the little wog dog's face hurt me. As quickly he submitted to the indignity of the kit bag. This was to be no brave show for him. In all his glory he was hidden in the hot, gloomy depths of a kit bag. As we filed out for final inspection, it could not be over too soon for me. The ranks stood like statues as the inspecting officers came slowly, ever so slowly, down rank after rank, closely inspecting each man. There could be no replacement of kit from now on. It could be a serious matter if any careless or flurried man left an article of gear behind. The stifling hot day was not the cause of my sweating, as those intent officers drew nearer and nearer. Would Horrie bark? Would he growl? Would he shuffle deep down in that stuffy kit bag? I knew what he was feeling, half suffocated, listening to the beloved sounds of the parade around him. Horrie was a little brick, not a whimper, not a movement, as the inspecting officers ran careful eyes over me and my gear. At last they moved on. Soon we were on the march, across desert, to the Ikingamaruit railway station, and fate was kind. A truck came along whose driver was in the know, and I passed the little dog up to him. "He'll be all right," smiled the driver. "I'm to unload at the station, then goodness knows where I'll be ordered. I'll tie Horrie up to that little tree away back of the station. You know the one I mean." We did. There was a rebel story to that same tree. Horrie was fortunate to dodge that long, hot trek. It would have been awful in the kit bag. During the dense muster at the station, the rebels clocked me while I quietly edged aside and hurried away to the tree. Horrie was there, a pathetic little figure, staring out towards the station. His frantic delight subsided to pleading little whimperings and pawings at my urgent warnings. I bundled him into the kit bag again, and there was not a movement out of him as I hurried back to the station. Once aboard the train, we let him out amongst the packed troops. He dived straight for a window, and for the remainder of the trip was the keenest of us all. Everything in the passing countryside was of interest to him, but his delight was to growl and bark at every Arab we passed. It was a monstrously slow trip. Again and again we stopped to allow the passing of troop train after troop train. Something big was doing. Horrie enjoyed the stops. Urchins and full-grown Arabs would appear at the carriage windows with cries of "eggs a cook," "eggs or bread," hopefully offering us dirty-looking boiled eggs and rolls of alleged bread. That they grinned at Horrie from the safety of the platforms made the wog dog all the madder. With a speculative eye, while disregarding the angry Horrie, a wog shuffled up to the rebel's carriage, obviously clutching something precious under his dirty rags. "Good whiskey," he whined with a cunning glance around him. "Shufti, George, show me," demanded Murchy, and the wog, casting suspicious looks around, shuffled to the window, then slipped a bottle of whiskey into Murchy's hand. With a frown, Murchy carefully examined the bottle. The cork, which certainly had not been tampered with, nor had the label or the tempting, clear amber fluid within. We were not going to be taken down. No wretched wog was going to catch us. Silently we waited Murchy's verdict. This really did look the goods. "Undoubtedly Scotch," declared Murchy. "Hooray!" yelped Popa. "Buy it." "How much?" demanded Murchy. 500 mils, replied the Arab. Murchy paid over, and the Arab, with an eye alert for military police, disappeared amongst the station crowd. "Cheap," declared Murchy, fondly handling the bottle. "Open her up," advised Popa. Murchy did so with a gusto, and offered the first drink to me. I was just in time to intercept and interpret Popa's urgent wink, so handed the glass back to Murchy with a polite "After you dig." Murchy slung back his head and took a long, deep gulp that screwed his face into an agonized expression. With bulging cheeks, he dived for the window. To Popa's uproarious mirth, in surprise we laughed at Murchy's anguished spittings as he howled swear words back to the station as the train moved off. Something obviously was lamentably amiss with that undoubted Scotch. "Ha ha ha," roared Popa. 500 mils for a bottle of weak tea, if it's not something a jolly sight worse. We looked aghast at the implication while Murchy yelled, "Well, it's not, you gloating sewer rat, it's only weak tea." We roared as Murchy glowered at Popa, who smiled with the knowing expression of the old desert campaigner. "You don't deserve your luck," he wagged a finger at Murchy. "It's not often the wogs fill the bottle with good weak tea. Mostly it's camel's water, or horse, or donkey, or wog. What I'm surprised at is that dull-witted wog who picked you didn't sell you a bottle of wogs." "Oh yeah," spluttered Murchy. "Well, now I'll tell you something you'll be surprised at. That 500 mils I paid the wog was the 500 mils I owed you." "You're telling me," demanded Popa. "I'm telling you. Now laugh that off. What I want to know," broke in Feathers, "is how they got the whiskey out. I'd swear that stopper has never been tampered with." "Neither it has," explained Popa, "but look at the bottom." We did so, but could distinguish nothing strange, until Popa pointed out a tiny round mark in the glass on the bottom of the bottle. "They bore a little hole in the bottom," explained Popa. "Drain the whiskey out, then fill the bottle with cold tea or what not. Then they mix up a pinch of borax and soda, heap it around the hole, and melt it into the glass with a blowpipe. The glass bead fills up the hole again, given a good man at the job. It is practically impossible to detect." "So that's it," exclaimed Feathers. "Well, I'm blessed." "Not quite all of it," said Popa pityingly. "When the bottle is filled, they sell it to some poor mutt for 500 mills. "Just so," broke in Murchy unforgivingly. "But in this case you are the mutt who's paid the mills." "We'll see about that, me lad," said Popa fiercely. "Oh yeah, how are you going to get it?" "I'll take it out of your hide." "Yeah, you can't give me one more fatigue than I'm willing to do." "We'll see about that," promised Popa darkly. At long last we reached the wharf at Alexandria, the little wog dog a bundle of excitement, as I put him back into the kit bag and petted him warningly. Now was the critical moment. One slip and the wog dog would never see active service with us. We filed out of the train onto the wharf and formed up in 3 ranks for the final roll call. I gazed up at the troop ship awaiting us, the crew lining the rails. On the bows was the dim name Chocla. She was only about 3,000 tons. I wondered how on earth we were all going to pack aboard. We thrilled while gazing up at the scars of shell and bomb that had not stopped the little ship. But my anxious concern was to be aboard her. Once up that gangway, now so very close, and the rebels could vanish in the search for Horrie's suite. Once aboard the lugger kept recurring to my mind. Sharp and clear rang out the roll call, and man after man smartly answered, "No inspection this." So, for air, I'd allowed Horrie's head out of the bag, his porthole part hidden by my arm. As bad luck would have it, just as I opened my mouth to answer my name, Horrie spotted an Arab, and his bark yelped out with my "Here, sir." A low chuckle rippled from the ranks, a smothered growl from Horrie. With an innocent expression, I cast a glance in the direction of the officers and noted a discreet smile or two. Ah, Horrie in camp had made more friends than we knew. My eyes faced front on the instant, and the old heart began again as the roll call carried on. Presently we were filing up the gangway, only a matter of minutes now. The quarters allotted the signal section were down aft, and immediately we clambered down there into the depths. I laughed with sheer relief. "Good lad," smiled Don. "You've done it." "We've all done it," I replied, which was true. I cannot express on paper the willing teamwork of all the rebels on Horrie's behalf. The noisy throwing off of our gear, the thumps as men tried bunks and laughed and joked, brought a whimper and sympathetic wriggling from the kit bag. "We'll let him out a while," I said. "He's safe here, no one here but the boys." "Let him out," advised Gordy. No one is likely to look in on us, and if somebody does, we can smother him up in a second. Give him a breather, they all agreed, until we have time to scatter and find his suite. So, to Horrie's delight, he was free among the litter of gear with his friends, deep down in a little ship's hold. We'd almost got everything ship-shape. Every man had found bunk. The gear was almost all stowed away for the voyage, when, to a warning hiss, I snatched at Horrie and rammed him into the kit bag. But the little wretch objected and strenuously fought to struggle out again, stern first. A Tommy sailor, unseen away down in the dim end of the hold, had been watching proceedings. With uneasy defiance, I stared down towards him. "It's okay, Digger," he grinned. "You can let him out. We've got one too." Chapter 8. The Wog Dog Under Fire. I sat on the bunk and laughed. The rebels joined in. The sailor came forward. It was our first introduction to the typical British Navy man. In the months beginning now, how many times we were to bless those same men. Of course, they would never have given the dog away. Our own sense should have told us that. But as Popa so often assured us, we never did have any sense. The sailor-man was unusually interested in Horrie, and the Wog Dog took to him at once. It appeared that the mascot they had smuggled aboard was the dead ring of Horrie, apparently the same breed. Horrie had a stump for a tail, whereas the ship's dog gloried in a full-length appendage, which the little blighter always carries mast high when the Jerrys tackle us, said the sailor proudly. That there should be another dog of Horrie's breed surprised us. We thought ours was the only one in the world, too, smiled the sailor. But when you see our Ben, you'll know there's another one. Ours is as game as a lion, and I'll bet yours proves so too. We picked Ben up at Benghazi after the Italians were driven out in the big push of 1941. He'd been abandoned, and we couldn't turn the poor little blighter down. We looked forward to being introduced to Ben. Above all, there was no need to worry over Horrie now, and no need to hunt the ship for a highly problematical suite. You can let him roam about the ship and find his sea legs, advised the sailor, as soon as we sail, but keep him below until we do sail, just in case. And with a friendly "we'll be seeing you," he went about his job. "We're set," declared Feathers. "The crew are all good blokes. This is going to be a happy ship." And it was. When well out at sea next morning, we brought Horrie up on deck. He took an intense interest in everything. He'd never been aboard before, and exploring the ship was great fun. But the waters rushing past had him tricked. Cautiously he approached the rails, always ready to leap back. He could not make it out at all, so he back-pedaled and up the deck again. Everyone received a sniff and wag of approval, and an invitation for a romp around the deck. When the crew produced Ben, the packed deck enjoyed a pantomime while the two made friends. Horrie's envious interest centered on Ben's long tail, which Ben erected mast high for inspection. Ben reciprocated, but by polite but amused interest in Horrie's stub of a tail, and they slowly waddled around one another in a mutual admiration society. Then Ben invited, "Come along, I'll show you around the ship," and waddled off with Horrie staggering at his tail. The little ship was now rolling uncomfortably, and there were unhappy signs that many of the soldiers shared Horrie's feelings. But Horrie had not yet ceased to take an interest in life. When the dogs returned to the deck, Horrie was proudly struggling with a bone as large as himself. On their tour of inspection, the first place Ben had introduced him to was the ship's galley and the cook. Just as well, for we only had bully beef to offer him. As a reward for the bone, Ben expected Horrie to romp and was obviously contemptuous of his efforts. Horrie tried hard but vainly, as he now rolled and staggered with a surprised, uneasy expression on his face. He could not understand why his legs were giving way under him, could not make out the sickly feeling stealing over him. After midday it blew up rough, and Horrie lost all interest in fun and games. I never before realized the truth of the expression "sick as a dog." I selected a quiet place to lie down in and die, and Horrie crawled up to me. He could not walk. Surely there never was a more miserable pair. Horrie, with his chin rolled on the deck, his little legs stretched out fore and aft, his eyes gazing for hours into my face, beseeching me to do something to stop the ship rolling. I would have moved heaven and earth to have been able to do it, but all I moved was my dinner, which hurriedly went to the fishes. The crew were wonderful. To anyone really ill, they immediately gave up their own bunks, while cheery words and a hot cup of tea were readily available. Next morning was much calmer, thank heaven. Ben came waddling along to coax Horrie to come and play, but he miserably declined. He lay there with envious eyes, silently watching the pranks of the old sea dog. A sailor asked me, "Can I show your Horrie to the old man?" "Oh, Popa's seen him often," answered Murchy. "You take the wog dog to the old man," said Popa to the puzzled sailor. "Take no notice of this has-been." "Oh yeah," growled Murchy, and Horrie waddled away to be introduced to the captain, while Popa quietly went below. He soon returned, and sitting down beside the helpless Murchy, began with gusto to suck a large piece of greasy fat, a ghastly sound. Murchy rolled towards me. "Chuck this overboard," he implored weakly. Popa laughed and gurgled. "What, not seasick? Surely, Murchy." "I wish this ship would sink, and you too, especially you," moaned Murchy. "She won't sink," said Popa confidently. "Don't worry, she's a good ship." And he sucked with a sound that, "Please go away," I whispered. "If only she would sink," groaned Murchy. "She won't sink," declared Popa brightly. "Don't worry, Murchy boy." "That's what I'm worrying about," groaned Murchy. "She won't sink." But the rolling calmed down, and gradually we revived. In late afternoon we passed several islands, at which Horrie, rapidly recovering, gazed with earnest attention. "How he'd like to be ashore," smiled Fitz. "No more than me," said Murchy feelingly. "We're getting near Bomb Alley, lads," called a sailor warningly. Neither Gordy nor Fitz nor Murchy nor Feathers nor I were interested in Bomb Alley or any other alley, but we presently realized that the soldiers who had not obeyed the warning to wear life jackets at all times were now attempting to put them on. The Chocla had made numerous crossings between Alexandria and Greece carrying Australian soldiers, and had been heavily bombed in some place called Bomb Alley. "Better put your life jacket on, Fitz," I suggested. "Give mine to Horrie," replied Fitz. This jolt brought us back to life. We'd forgotten all about a life jacket for Horrie, should the ship be sunk. "Could a pup swim in a sea like this?" I asked Popa. "Not for long," he replied doubtfully. "Couldn't we fit Horrie up with a life jacket?" suggested Don. I remembered a broken, discarded jacket and wandered away to get it. We cut 3 pieces of cork from it and sewed them into a strip of canvas, making the jacket into the form of a saddle, 1 strip to fit down each side and 1 over the back. I called Horrie, who was playing with Ben. Horrie came inquiringly across the deck, but did not seem pleased when we fitted the belt around him. Ben stood with a weary eye on proceedings. Horrie insisted on wagging his tail at Ben, which made the fitting difficult. Don hacked a half-moon out of the center piece of cork, and this enabled the jacket to be pulled well forward, the idea being to keep his head more buoyant than his stern. "What he swallows in the stern won't matter," said Feathers. The final problem was to fasten the jacket in place. "String would cut into his tummy," objected Gordy. "Half a mo," advised a sailor. He returned with a smile and a long bandage, the very thing. We wound the bandage over the jacket and round Horrie's middle, then fastened it securely in place. A perfect job. "It's the first dog's life jacket ever made," said Murchy admiringly. "We ought to go into business," declared Gordy. "We'd almost forgotten our seasickness." "Off you go," I ordered, and Horrie scampered away to his waiting friend, but feeling the life jacket, rolled over and energetically kicked out. This effort proving vain, he leapt up and did a buck-jumping turn, at which Ben barked approval, encouraged by sickly laughs from the soldiers. Horrie went out of breath, invited Ben to give a hand, and Ben promptly fastened his teeth to the bandage, and bracing his legs, tugged with might and main and brought Horrie down on top of him. To a startled yelp and struggle from Horrie, they sorted themselves out. Then Ben noticed the end of the bandage had become unfastened, so he snapped at it and tugged again, while I urgently called Horrie. Horrie struggled to obey, but was pulled back by Ben. Horrie indignantly wheeled around and snapped at Ben, as if blaming him for the laughs at his expense. Then he came trotting across to me, but forgave Ben and turned to bark that he wouldn't be long now. As he turned back towards me, Ben grabbed the bandage end and bolted down the deck. And that was the end of the safety jacket. That evening we steamed into a pretty harbor with numerous small islands and buoys dotted about, and what kindled the troops' enthusiasm after so many months in the desert, beautiful green foliage lining the shore, bracken fern and green grass and clean white houses, made a lovely sight after the desert. This was Piraeus. If ever troops welcomed a port, we welcomed the port of Athens. The wog dog, who was barking his joy to the shore, was hurriedly popped inside the kit bag. Ben thought it a new game and playfully nipped the bulging bag. To an agonized howl from Horrie, this was a bad start, as we were not lining up for disembarkation. But Horrie, stung to the quick by the unfair attack, was determined to bark his way off the ship. I was trying to stand at ease while the gangway was lowered, but Ben waddled around and barked up at Horrie's muffled barks. The crew enjoyed themselves, but I was sweating, for the chorus of barks was creating more attention than the orders of the commanding officer, now giving us disembarkation orders without, it would seem, even dreaming there was a wog dog on board. Thankfully, I saw a fleet of small lighters drawing alongside the ship. We began to clamber cautiously down the gangways. From the lower end of the gangway to the small craft bobbing on the swell below was a precarious drop of 3 feet or more. A man had to pick his time, and helped by the outstretched arms of the Greek sailors to jump. If he missed the jump, he went into the drink. The cheery Greeks were helping the boys by catching the kit bags dropped to them. I had no option, so carefully dropped my bag into the outstretched arms of a Greek sailor, and then jumped. As the Greek clutched the bag, Horrie wriggled and growled and snapped, and the surprised Greek toppled backward. I snatched the kit bag and bustled in among the boys. The sailor picked himself up with a surprised expression that changed to alarm as the air raid siren above us whistled piercingly. 2 urgent shouts and gesticulation among the Greeks, our lighter steered an erratic course towards shore, sped by the bomb bursts and shrieks of diving planes. When we leapt ashore, Horrie sprang out of the bag with a bark of delight and led the scramble for cover. The Greek anti-aircraft guns crashed into action, and Horrie leaped around as if thunderstruck and scampered to me terrified. I snatched him up and raced to a drain into which the boys were disappearing. Horrie was trembling like a leaf. We crouched in the mouth of the drain and watched the raid while I tried to soothe Horrie. Ships were fighting for their lives. Searchlights swept the sky to catch a gleaming plane that missed, turned, and dived while shooting machine gun bullets down the beam of light. As plane after plane was caught in the searchlights, the sky broke into a roar of bursting shells, intermingled with the red and yellow and green of flying onions, and streams of tracer bullets, a terrifyingly beautiful spectacle. Then came the deep whump of a bomb landing fairly close, and Horrie, with bristling hair, leapt into action to bark furiously at the silver planes in the sky. With tail erect and eyes fiery gold, he barked his defiance to the Luftwaffe away up there, dodging the slowly moving streams of fiery onions that were now bursting from every point of the compass. Horrie had made good. An hour later, and we trailed off through the night to the little Greek village of Daphne. During the early hours, low-flying hostile aircraft dropped their eggs with a roar that shook the ground, showering leaves on the tent roof. Dazed by the fiery explosions, the little wog dog crept to my bunk and buried his cold nose under my armpit. Presently he gained courage again and growled a low growl, but I'm afraid he did not really mean it. "Just you come down here so as Horrie can get his teeth into you," yelled Murchy as an enemy plane roared overhead. "He can't put the wind up Horrie," came Feather's voice from the darkness, "like he's got it up me." "Yah," came Popa's growl. "Soldiers, the old relic is keeping his courage up," came Fitz's distant voice. I yelled out for Gordy and caught a muffled answer. The rebels were all right so far. Dawn, smiling over sea and hills, found us in a delightful spot. Green fields, green crops, well-tended vineyards, fields of poppies. Little white houses, all welcoming a glorious April sunshine. Then Feathers called out in delight, "Good old gums! Well, I'm blessed. We're camped under Aussie gum trees." And so we were, a good omen. The familiar, dear old trees to shelter and welcome us. "This is a country worth fighting for," declared Gordy, and we all agreed, gazing over the lovely scene. And so this was Greece. Lots of smiling, dark-eyed youngsters soon came to invade the camp. We made good friends. Who can help making friends with youngsters? No man but could help be bashfully flattered when these youngsters looked upon us as heroes come to save their land. Alas, a particular delight to the kiddies when the tins of bully beef we gave them, meat of any kind, seemed very scarce, a luxury of luxuries to these youngsters. Here, too, the wog dog had his first offering of bully beef, and turned up his nose. Next morning we passed in triumphal procession through cheering Athens. The people went almost frantic. They rained flowers upon us from streets and balconies. The little army of these folk, so very, very few, had held back the might of Italy for many long, bloody months, and now, just as the hordes of Germany were marching to overwhelm them, here were we come to save them. As our convoys of trucks rolled through the streets, the soldiers scrambled to the truck roofs, swarmed on the mud guards, catching the flowers thrown by the people, giving cheer for cheer in tumultuous greeting. On the rebels' truck, Horrie was wildly excited, barking from the roof of the truck at the footpaths and up to the balconies. In the roars of cheering and laughter and whistling, he was like a cat on hot bricks, not knowing which way to turn. The sun shone smiling upon this lovely land, and these warm-hearted people, lots and lots of folk, laughed and waved to the little excited pup. Their wave of greeting is unlike our own. They extended the hand with the palm turned up, opening and closing the hand more in a beckoning attitude, then a wave. The meaning was similar to our good luck, but meant more precisely go and return. I wish we were the last truck in the convoy, sighed Dawn. And Feathers, in spick-and-span uniform, had smiling eyes all for the laughing dark-eyed girls crowing around the slowly moving trucks. I'd shed no tears, said Gordy thoughtfully, if we were left behind amongst this crowd. A flat tire would be welcome right now, mused Fitz. Murchie was balancing precariously on the truck roof, enthusiastically waving his rifle to the shouts of Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. The fall of Benghazi to the Australian troops was a beacon light in the minds of the Greek people, and here was Murchie taking all the credit. Alas, our reception was that of conquering heroes. Perhaps the Greeks knew better what lay ahead of us, realized more than we. Surely they had hoped for a far greater force. The story of David and Goliath is not repeated in modern warfare, when it is a handful against many men and many machines. We were to give our very best, but at last we were clear of the city. We gazed back at Athens. High up on a hill, the ruins of the famous Acropolis seemed brooding over the city. Then we were traveling along the northern road, going inland, winding through village after village with quaint, square-built, whitewashed houses, each little village with its own church and high steeple, each with its little village square, with a white wooden cross in the center. The trucks rumbled along cobbled streets, sometimes so narrow there was only room for a military truck to pass. The footpaths were crowded with cheering villagers, the windows in the dwellings above the shops, all with their laughing people showering flowers and good wishes down upon us. Most of the folk wore their national costumes, and the village lasses wore a picture. Jet black hair and laughing brown eyes were emphasized by the smooth olive skin. They were dressed in white, ankle-length skirts, embroidered with flowers of contrasting colors, lively young things in their white lacy blouses, pulled in tight around tempting waist, and little vests of vivid blue or red laced criss-cross down the front with silk cord. Strong, shapely arms showed from wide, puffy sleeves caught in tight above the elbows. Little sandaled feet peeped from below generous skirts. The menfolk were mostly at the front, but those that remained wore long sheepskin coats and black velvet trousers, caught in below the knee after the style of Bao Yang's. Their headgear, small skull caps. Here and there was a Greek priest in long black gown. Nearly all the men wore short beards. Horrie was almost exhausted with excitement. As we passed through village after village, the funny little dog, frantically barking and dancing up on the roof of the truck, was a source of attraction and laughter. He thinks the whole show is being put on for him, laughed Dawn. If only I could command as much attention, sighed Murchie, as we saluted a gay bevy of beauty. You're attracting plenty of attention, growled Popa. They haven't seen such an ugly man since Caesar passed through. But Murchie was too busy with the girls to reply.